Thank you very much for coming out today. My name is Scott Ambler. I'm here to talk about a fairly interesting topic, I hope. How to choose your WoW. How do you choose your way of working? And how do you do so effectively, I think is the real question here. So, my name is Scott Ambler. I'm one of the people behind the Discipline Agile Toolkit, or the Discipline Agile Framework, whatever you want to call that. Framework is starting to turn into a swear word. Unfortunately, in the Agile community, thanks safe. But what can you do, right? I've been doing this Agile stuff for a long time. Many of you might remember me as the thought leader behind Agile modeling and Agile data and all those good sorts of things. So I have a tendency to take on some of the harder, not quite so sexy problems, but certainly important issues. So anyways, I help organizations around the world myself and my team. We help organizations around the world to understand this Agile stuff in enterprise class situations, often at scale. So we take on some of the harder problems. Anyways, what do I want to talk about? I'm going to walk through a four-step, and this is an iterative process, but I'll talk about it in terms of steps anyways. A four-step process for how do you choose your WoW? How do you actually help a team or help an organization to choose their way of working and to evolve their way of working over time. So that way, what you do, the way that you work, actually reflects the situation that you're in. So the first step, of course, is to understand your situation. We like to say that every person is unique, every team is unique, every organization is unique, and we find ourselves in unique situations. So years ago, we developed something we call the software development complexity framework. And what we were talking about is what complexity factors, what scaling factors do teams run into? So when we're scaling Agile at scale or scaling lean approaches at scale, what types of challenges do they face? I should also point out I've got a lot of diagrams in this deck. This deck is on SlideShare already, so if you do a quick search for my name, you'll find this. And the point that we want to make, that we're trying to make with this slide, is every team is in a unique situation. Some teams will be small, they'll be like 4 or 5 people. Other teams will be 40 or 50 people, or several hundred people. I've worked with successful teams, I should say, at very large scales, 500, 600 people. So it is possible. Not quite so desirable, but certainly possible. And I've also certainly worked at teams at different sizes as well. Sometimes teams are geographically distributed. You know, the easy situation is we're co-located, but we might be working in situations where some people are globally distributed. We might be facing a really tough problem. We have domain complexity. We might have regulatory compliance. So maybe we're in a financial critical or a life critical situation. That's going to change the way that my team works. Maybe we face technical complexity. You know, we always like to say, we like to talk about we're building brand new systems from scratch using brand new technologies. That's really fun. I never get to see that. I get to see the multi-platform, dealing with legacy code and legacy data that's been around sometimes for decades. I've worked on systems where literally the children of the people who originally wrote the system are now working on the code. I'm waiting to work with the grandchildren at some point of the people who wrote, and I fully expect that to happen, probably later on, right towards the end of my career, but I suspect I'm going to run into that situation. I'm looking forward to it. And sometimes we're organizationally distributed, where we involve contractors and consultants, people from different divisions. So the point I want to make is that your team will be somewhere on all of these scaling factors. The person beside you, their team, will also be there, but they will have different scaling factors. And of course, each of these people will be unique on unique teams. So even if you face the exact same situation, you'll still be unique people in a unique situation with different sets of skills, different ways of looking at the universe, different cultures, different mindsets. So you will approach the same problem, the same situation differently than a different group of people. This is something that is phenomenally easy to observe if we choose to. And the reason why we start with this is you need to accept this. You need to choose, as an organization, you need to choose to accept this because the implication is is that one process will not fit all. So if you're looking for the one defined process, the one repeatable process for all your teams, doesn't exist. And if you inflict the same process on all of your teams, what will happen is it might work for one or two, but it'll be a disaster for everybody else. You have to allow your teams to choose their WoW, to choose their way of working, and to evolve it over time as we learn, as we get better, as we learn more about the domain, more about the technology, more about the processes and the practices and ourselves and our team and our organization. As we learn more, as we experiment over time, we want to evolve our WoW. We want to evolve the way that we work. So how do you do that effectively? So the Discipline Agile framework, or maybe toolkit might be a better word these days. One of the analogies we like to use is this one. So we like to say, and I think this is easy to observe if you choose to. We like to say that what we've observed, excuse me, is that the Agile community has gotten really good at building good teams, good software development teams. We really are at the forefront of finding new ways to get better productivity, better quality, better speed out of these teams. We really are at the forefront in the software engineering world. All the really interesting things happening in the Agile space, and Lean as well. But what happens, so we're good at building these racing car engines, these really great software development teams, but then we take these racing car engines and we plunk them into our organizational tractor and we wonder why we don't win the race. So the point that we like to make is if you want to win the race, you want to win the Fortune or the F1, you need a racing car, right? Not a tractor with a really good engine. You need a racing car with a really good engine. That's what DevOps is all about. Let's speed that up. And a lot of organizations are now getting to DevOps and doing some really cool things there. And that's a good start, but anybody can go out and buy a racing car. What you also need is you need a driver that knows what they're doing. You need a pit crew that can put gasoline in it in 3 seconds and put new tires on it in 4 seconds and all the good stuff that a pit crew does. So you need to have Discipline Agile IT, the entire IT. And it's interesting. You can observe now that the DevOps community is sort of stumbling into this now, figuring out, we need DevOps across the organization. You need to solve the IT problem, because if the IT groups aren't helping, or getting in the way and doing their own thing, then things are grinding to a halt. So we need a good car with a good crew. And then of course, that's not sufficient either. We also need a race. We need somewhere to go and apply this racing car and crew to make money. We need value streams. We need lines of business. We need these Discipline Agile enterprises that can act, these Agile businesses that can make money with our really good software development teams and our really great IT departments and DevOps stuff. So we need the overall picture. How do we do that? And the challenge is the big picture is complicated. It's ugly. It is what it is. And it's interesting, all the people we've been talking to at the booth today, they all suffer from these challenges. We've heard this story several times from different people in different companies now of, we're trying to do Agile, but the finance people are a problem. Or, we're not working well with the data folks. We're not working well with the release management folks, or whoever the challenge is. The rest of the organization is not doing Agile and it's slowing us down. Yes, that's right. We need to solve the bigger picture, not just the easy software development picture. So anyways, great engines are a good start, but nobody's going to pay money to look at an engine, I think. So the next step, once we recognize that we're unique companies in different situations, and it's a complex challenge. It's a complex challenge in front of us. We need to adopt a new mindset. And there's a lot of people here talking today about mindset and culture and all these great sort of things. And that's great. That's certainly important, because if you don't have the mindset, if you don't have the culture, things are probably not going to work out for you. So in Discipline Agile, we talk about 7 principles. We also, fully embrace the Agile Manifesto, and we've actually extended it. Some very interesting extensions for enterprise class organizations, which I would invite you to look into. And we're happy to talk about them at the booth if you happen to drop by. But also the framework itself, the toolkit itself, is based on 7 principles. The first one is a lean concept. We need to delight our customers, not just satisfy them, not just fulfill the specification, but to delight them. Because if we don't delight them, somebody else will. They will steal our customers away, and we will have problems surviving in today's marketplace. We need to delight our customers and continue to delight our customers. To do that, we need to be awesome. We need to have awesome people in awesome teams working for an awesome organization. We've heard about happiness and all that good sort of stuff. We need to really be awesome. People want to have to work here. They want to enjoy what they're doing. They want to be learning. They want to be having a good time. They want to be delighting their customer, doing a lot of great stuff. Let's be awesome. And one of the things we do in our workshops is we ask people, what's the best team you've ever been on? And then we go through the exercise and all that good sort of stuff, and we hear about awesome teams. And then the point we make is, and we don't ask, it's a rhetorical question, but is your existing team the best team you've ever been on? And if the answer is no, then what are you doing to make it the best team? Because you deserve to be on the best team ever. And that should be your team right now and be always getting better, and the next team you're on should be the best team, and so on. You should be always getting better, always trying to be awesome. But we need to be pragmatic. There's a lot of puritanism going on in the Agile community right now. And that's a bit problematic. If you're not doing this, you're not Agile. Well, no, who cares? Nobody's going to give you a little gold star for being Agile. The real thing is, are we delighting our customers? Are we learning? Are we getting better? Are we doing what we need to do in the situation that we're in? Are we doing the best that we can in the situation we're in? Are we trying to get better? That's what I look for. So we need to be pragmatic. Context counts. Different people in different situations will work in different ways. This is reality. You cannot force a single process on people and hope to succeed. You've got to help them to choose their WoW. You've got to allow them and help them to do it. So context counts. And in order to do that, we need to have choices. And a lot of the talk today is about choices. Let's give people choices. Let's put these choices into context and help them choose the way that they're going to work. We need to look at the bigger picture. We need to optimize flow across the organization, not just locally optimize for whatever my team does or whatever your team does, but everything's got to flow together. Because if the overall process, if we're not working together as teams, if we're not delighting our customers and working together effectively to do that, then we're sort of failing, aren't we? So we really need to look at the overall picture and optimize that, which might mean we need to do something that's inconvenient or something we didn't want to do. A lot of organizations really sort of struggle with this because of the complexity of this big picture of trying to become agile, trying to become more effective. They try to break up the way that they do it. We'll let the operations people figure out how they're going to be agile. We'll let the development people figure it out. We'll let the PMO figure it out. We'll let the data management folks go off and figure out how they're going to be agile. We're going to let the architects go off and figure out how they're going to be agile. And then it doesn't fit together. You got to look at the big picture and make all the work flow across the big picture. Otherwise, you're in trouble. All you're going to do is butt heads. And finally, we need to be enterprise aware. We need to do what's right for the company, not just what's convenient for us. Okay, and that is a much different proposition than the team-focused behavior that we see on Agile software development teams. That's great. It's great that you're focused on the team, but the team needs to be focused on the customer, on the rest of the enterprise. Do what's right for the company, not just what's convenient for you. So these are some of the underlying principles, the underlying principles of Discipline Agile. So once we start evolving and of course there's a bunch of great stuff in Lean and the Agile Manifesto and all this other good stuff. So once we start focusing on mindset, the next step is we need to start getting better. So how do we improve our processes? And one of our sayings is you go to war with the army that you got. So we'll read all these case studies about how Amazon is doing really cool stuff and they're releasing their production every few seconds, and eBay's doing this and Google's doing this and they're doing all this really awesome stuff, and Spotify does their thing and it's really cool. Well, that's great, but then that's not you. You are, whatever your organization is. So you've got your people with their skills, the way that they're organized, and yes, we can improve that over time, but right now, we got to get the job done. We got to keep the lights on. So more of a continuous improvement rather than a big bang approach might be the way to go. But anyways, let's see how both of these approaches work, and then you decide. So a lot of organizations, when they first realize, hey, we need to get better, what do? They start casting about. And sadly, one of the first questions is, what is everybody else doing? Because everybody else would know what they're doing except for you, right? The weird assumption that just because other people are doing it, it's going to work for you. But anyways, they start casting about and say, well, everybody's doing SAFe. SAFe must be a good idea. That level of logic. Or everybody's doing Scrum. Scrum must be a great idea. And it might be. It might work out for you. But typically what we see, when we see successful adoptions, let's assume everything works out. When we see successful adoptions of these methods or these frameworks, what you typically end up with is a productivity curve that looks like this. There's a little bit of a learning curve. So you take a dip in productivity right away. And then over time, things get, assuming it all works out, it might take you a few weeks until you hit this trade-off point, or a few months sometimes. But eventually things get better. But then you plateau. You hit the limits of the method. Because there's only certain things that Scrum covers and certain things that SAFe covers and certain things that Less covers. And you sort of hit the limits of the method and you plateau. Things are better, but it's certainly not this nirvana that we hear from Amazon and Google and companies like that. So how can we do better? So the lean folks talk about Kaizen. They talk about continuous improvement. Instead of trying to do this big bang, adopt a new method, force it on everybody, let's instead start from where we are and improve. Let's get better. Let's make small improvements over time, and we'll make this very long improvement journey over time, and we'll constantly get better. And that is exactly the message coming out of Amazon and Google and all these other companies that are doing all this really cool stuff. All their stories are the same. At some point in the distant past, we realized that we needed to get better to survive. We decided to do that. We thought it was going to be a transformation project. Then after a while, very quickly, we realized, no, it's not a project. It's really a journey. It's going to take multiple years. And then their stories are always, and we made this little change and got better, made this little change, made this little change, made this little change, made this little change, made this little change. And then now, 10, 15 years later, we're awesome. And you'll be reading these case studies going, oh my God, they're doing all this really cool stuff. We can't possibly do that. Yes, you can. There's nothing special about Amazon, about Google, other than they decided to get better. They decided to get on the path, and they decided to stay on the path. And what's also interesting about all these case studies is they all conclude the same way. This is where we were a couple of years ago, and we're sharing all these really, really cool ideas because we know it's going to take, if you get on this path, it will take you many years to catch up to where we are today. And we will be, if it takes you 5 years to get to where we are right now, we will be 5 years ahead of you again. Because we know if we don't continue, even though we're totally awesome, we know that if we don't continue to get even better, somebody else will become more awesome than us and wipe us out. This is what happens in these organizations. They figure it out. They become true learning organizations. So what does that look like? From a team point of view or from a group point of view, you start by identifying a potential improvement. This is all about doing one thing at a time and see what happens. So you identify potential improvement. You experiment with it. You experiment with this new way of working. So maybe we're going to adopt holding a daily stand-up meeting, or we're going to adopt holding a regular demo. Whatever this new way of working is, let's give it a try, see what happens. So they give it a fair shake. They try it for a month or two, whatever makes sense. And then they assess, hey, did this work out for us? If it worked out, or some of it worked out, well, then they adopt the new stuff that works. If some of it didn't work out, or it all didn't work out, they abandon the stuff that didn't work out for them. And if they're nice about it, they let everybody else know, hey, we tried daily stand-ups and they were really cool, they're awesome, we're going to continue to do them. And here's why. So they share their learnings with the rest of the organization to give back. This is basically continuous improvement, or Kaizen, in a nutshell. And then repeat, of course. And there's different flavors of this. There's UDA and PDSA and PDCA. There's different flavors of that, but it's all the same basic. Try something, experiment with it, measure it, make a decision, do it again. So you end up with an improvement curve that looks like this. And if you stay on this path, you improve and you improve and you improve and you improve over time. And this is exactly what all of these case studies in the DevOps community end up being. We made a bunch of changes, one change, one change, one change, one change, one change. Now we're really awesome. And we're getting better, and we're constantly getting better. So that's great, but there's an interesting implication here. How the heck do you identify these potential improvements? And this is where all the hand waving, all the methodologists talk about this now, right? Like all the methods, like Scrum will tell you, oh yeah, it's the art of the possible. It's the art of possibility. No, politics is the art of possibility, but thanks for messing up that quote. And what happens is, and they sort of wave their hands and say, yeah, you can do anything with Scrum, you can improve, but there's this, but we have no advice to help you, but you can figure it out because you're really smart. Yeah, you're really smart, but figuring it out on your own is slow and expensive. Might not be what you want to do because you're not process experts. And you shouldn't have to become process experts in order to delight your customers, I hope, right? So anyways, so the big challenge with this entire process is that the very first step. And when you don't have a process background, when you don't know what all your options are, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, then you take good guesses, right? You might read an article or a blog, or you go to a conference and there's a bunch of great ideas. You come running back to work the next day. Oh, I heard about this technique. We got to do it. Yeah, you heard about that technique. What about the other 5 techniques that were even better that the speaker didn't tell you about? Oh, and you'd never ever hear about it because that's not what they're trying to sell you, right? So anyways, you end up with a curve like this, which is good. This is awesome stuff, but we can do better. So where Discipline Agile comes in is we give you options and we say, hey, you know what? Here's what you need to think about. Here's a bunch of good options. Here are the trade-offs. You make the best choice. So now that you know what your options are and you know what the trade-offs are of those options, you choose the best approach for you that you can do in the situation that you face. Not just the best practice that we want to sell you, but here's a bunch of practices, some of which are better than others, but do the best that you can do right now and try to get better over time. So with that, with what we call guided continuous improvement, you get a steeper curve because what happens is it's that next step, the experimentation. And the idea here is if we can improve your choice, if you can make better, if you can identify options that are more likely to succeed, then you have fewer failures. You have more successes. I would rather, a lot of people talk, well, let's fail fast. Yeah, that's okay. I would rather learn fast, or better yet, succeed fast, right? And you succeed faster by making better choices to begin with. You make better choices that are more likely to succeed, and you end up with a steeper continuous improvement curve, which is exactly what you want. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I've had several conversations already today with people going, oh yeah, we're doing Agile, but we're special, and we're going to figure it out. We're going to reinvent the wheel, and we're going to figure all the stuff out because we're really smart. And what they're really trying to do is, they want to have several years of this and then become consultants. Okay, fine, I fully appreciate that. But, we're going to reinvent the wheel. It's like, no, you're not special, at least not in the positive sense of the word. And you don't need to reinvent the wheel because we can have the humility to recognize that thousands of teams before us have been in similar situations. It might not be the exact situation we're in, but thousands of people have figured it out before. So let's leverage their learnings. We don't need to figure it out the hard way. Instead, we can go and adopt, and we can leverage a toolkit or leverage some sort of knowledge base. So we can make life a little bit easier for ourselves. Might not be as fun, but it's certainly more effective. So then what happens with these, what we see in a lot of organizations is you might start off with some, existing method, give you a kickstart, you've bought into all the marketing rhetoric. Okay, fine. But then once you hit the plateau, or once you realize, oh, this method that we've adopted isn't quite right for our situation, and we see this a lot with SAFe. I think SAFe is great. There's great ideas in SAFe, but SAFe is for multiple teams developing a single product. Same with LESS. If that's your situation, LESS or SAFe might be good ideas. Maybe, I don't know, but good chance that they are. If that's not your situation, then those aren't the solutions for you. So it's multiple teams building one single big complicated product. That's what less than safe are for. If you've got multiple teams, but they're all doing different things, you need something else, right? So anyway, so think about that. But anyways, a lot of organizations, they adopt whatever, and then they realize, hey, you know what, we've plateaued, so let's start improving. So that's one, so if you don't start just by improving like a lot of the DevOps guys do, fine. If you want to start with a method, fine. And then we can get on a better improvement path over time by taking the methodology blinders off and starting to choose to get better. Exactly like the lean people, like the Toyota folks have been telling us for several decades now. That's all we're saying here. So anyways, how do you actually do this? How do you improve your decisions? That's an interesting question. Okay, so when we're tailoring our WoW, when we're first thing we got to do is put our WoW together. Either buy it straight out of the box with Safe or Scrum or Less or whatever you want to do, or put it together ourselves. Start with the existing team, go to war with the army that you got, following whatever process they're following, and then let's start doing continuous improvement. So let's adopt. So say we're actually going to actually allowed to choose our own WoW. That's a big assumption, I guess. But first thing we can do, understand the situation. We were talking about it earlier. Then we've got to choose a life cycle. Talk about that in a second. And then once we've chosen a life cycle, which makes a bunch of choices for us, then we're going to start tuning it to meet the situation that we're actually in. And then over time, we're going to improve as we learn, as we get better. That's the basic idea here. So the first thing we got to do, choose a life cycle. So in Discipline Agile, we support 6 different life cycles. We also recognize that traditional exists. We don't really support it, but we recognize, hey, there will be some teams in an organization that are still doing traditional, and that's okay. There's a very small class of problems where the traditional serial life cycle makes sense. Fine, do that. Why not, right? It'd be foolish not to. In the vast majority of situations, though, there's other reasons you want to follow their life cycle. So let's walk through these one at a time. So one of the life cycles that we promote is a Scrum-based project type of a life cycle. And I appreciate that some people believe that project is a swear word. Okay, fine, good reasons for that. But anyways, the fact is some organizations are still doing projects, so support them. So if you want to do Agile projects, then this is an enterprise class life cycle for that, based on Scrum. But we recognize you got a little bit of upfront work to do. It's inception, they call it sprint 0 in Scrum. Tends to be 2 or 3 sprints, not just one, but minor details. Then you do the construction thing, and eventually you got to release into production. And we also recognize that you're one of many teams in the organization, so there's some sort of portfolio management, architecture stuff going on long before you kick off your project. And eventually you release into production. The vast majority of teams are supporting something that's already up and running in production, so they're getting change requests coming in as they're building the new thing. And those change requests and new requirements, which need to be prioritized and put on your backlog. Pretty basic stuff. So that's the Scrum-based Agile life cycle. Then we have the Lean life cycle. This is based on Kanban. So no iterations, no sprints in this one. Different ways that you can prioritize the work. We do coordination meetings and demos and retrospectives when it makes sense to do so, not just because the calendar tells us. But once again, we've got the phases because you got to get the team started, got to do the work, got to release into production at some point, all that good sort of stuff. Now, an interesting thing about these life cycles is you can notice same milestones, same lightweight, risk-based milestones along the bottom there. So one of the big threats in many organizations, when you talk to senior management and say, oh, we're going to let teams choose their own way of working. Oh my God, teams are going to do everything differently? Yeah, they're going to do everything differently, regardless of what management wants. And they'll cover it up and they'll lie to you. If you try to inflict the same process on everybody, what'll happen is they'll fake it and they'll lie to you, right? They'll fake the documents and all that good sort of stuff, because that's what you do to survive. Right? So instead, let's do lightweight, risk-based milestones, which could be something as simple as a discussion in a hallway. Keep it as lightweight as we possibly can, but have consistent milestones across the life cycles. That way, management can still do their thing and not mess it all up for everybody else. So a lean-based life cycle. Lean continuous life cycle. So when you allow the teams to stay together, when you move away from the project mindset, and you allow the teams to stay together, to learn, to improve. Inception goes away by itself. It happened in the distant past. Transition goes away through automation. So we get into this continuous construction life cycle. We're releasing into production maybe several times a day. Exactly what the Amazons and the Googles of the world are telling us. Once again, now these milestones here are typically fully automated, but they're still there. So from a governance point of view, we can still do lightweight, risk-based governance without messing up the teams. And of course, we got the same thing for Agile, so we can do a Scrum-based continuous delivery Agile, arguably not true continuous delivery. Maybe you're releasing into production every Friday afternoon. I've worked with several teams where that was the case. So they're not quite continuous delivery, but they're close enough that, give them credit, right? It's still fully automated and things are going well, but for whatever reason, they want to release it once a week. Okay, so it's a step, it's a step towards lean continuous delivery perhaps. So all good stuff. Sometimes we need to explore new ideas. So, we have this vision of new product that we want to bring to a marketplace. So what we do, we can take a lean startup approach. This is slightly different than lean startup. So lean startup is serial. Do one experiment at a time, to put together one MVP, run it in production, see what happens, and then act, observe and act. From a complexity theory point of view, what we really want to do is run multiple experiments at once. Parallelize this. So let's run, this is what A/B testing is all about, if you're familiar with that. Let's run several experiments in production at once, measure, observe, make intelligent decisions based on actual data coming in from usage, and then determine try to identify what our potential customers actually want, so that way we can turn it into a real product by following one of the other life cycles. And of course, we've got a program life cycle, a team of team type of a life cycle. So similar, if you're familiar with less or safe, same, very similar concept. We rendered differently, but same basic concepts of we've got this large program life cycle. So 6 different life cycles depending on the situation you're in. So you choose your life cycle in order to make some basic decisions as a team, how we're going to work together, and then you start tweaking from there. So just to sort of summarize, the governance is baked right in. Governance is not a swear word for us. I hear really dysfunctional discussions sometimes about governance on some Agile teams. You are being governed, like it or not. I believe you deserve to be governed well. Call me crazy. And if we don't step up as Agilists and help the governance people, help leadership understand here's how you govern Agile teams effectively, then what will happen is more than likely they will come up with a relatively dysfunctional, old school approach to governance based on producing documents and quality gates and stuff like that. It'll make sense to them, but it'll be the kiss of death to the Agile teams. And many organizations, I bet you at least half the people at this conference are working in organizations right now today, probably far more than half, where their existing IT governance is a complete disaster, and it's probably one of the big, I'm seeing all these heads nod, and it's hampering your ability to be Agile. We've got to engage with leadership effectively and help them understand. Help them get a better mindset, but also help them to do. So a huge risk in the Agile community right now is this idea around being Agile. And I'm a firm believer in being Agile, but if you don't also know how to do Agile, you're useless. And feel free to quote me on that. Being Agile is good, but being Agile and being able to do Agile, much better. If you don't know what you're doing, your mindset doesn't really matter if you don't have the fundamental skills to get the job done, does it? We've got to stop parking our brains at the door on that issue. Okay, we've got to be smarter than this. Got to know what we're doing. So Discipline Agile is a hybrid. We take ideas, we adopt ideas from a wide range of sources, including the evil traditional people and the evil unified process people, because they did, in fact, have a few good ideas that we can adopt. And the evil safe people and all that good sort of stuff. and we put them into context. Because there's hundreds, if not thousands of practices out there. Just think about all the great ideas you're hearing in one day at this conference. And I think a valid questions that you should be asking yourselves is, when do I do each of these practices? When don't I? Might be a better question to be asking. To what extent do I do them? When should I be doing them? How do they fit together? Because when you're figuring out, when you're choosing your WoW, when you're choosing your way of working, those are the questions you need to be able to answer. How does it all fit together? How does all aspects of what we're doing fit together? And how can I streamline it? Those are complicated questions, which is why I'm a bit concerned when I hear people say, oh, we're going to figure it out. Yeah, you'll be able to figure out that, but that will be the slowest and most expensive way you could do it, if you can do it. It takes a lot of effort figuring out, because these are big questions that you're trying to answer. So get some help. So in Discipline Agile, we've done this heavy lifting for you, so that way you can get a leg up. So one of the ways we do it is we take what we call a goal-driven approach, or an outcome-driven, a process outcome-driven approach. So even though every team works differently, and this is for software development teams, by the way, even though every team works differently, we can observe that at a high level, we need to achieve the same basic outcomes, address the same basic goals. So when I put the team together, well, one of the things we got to do is we got to form the team. We got to do some initial scoping. We got to do some initial architecture work, some initial planning. If we're smart, we'll do some risk, get the risk management stuff going. When we get into construction, if we're smart, we'll prove the architecture early with working code, walking skeleton, we like to call it. We should improve quality. We should pay down technical debt. We should do a bunch of other good things. Eventually, you should release it in production. When all this is going on, we should be growing our team members. We should make sure they're happy, right? Because mindset and happiness and all these good things, they're important. They're not sufficient, but they're certainly important. We should coordinate activities both within the team and with the other teams that we're working with. There's this myth in the Agile community called whole team. And what the myth is that the team has all the skills and all the resources available that they need to do their jobs. I will call complete and utter BS on that. Because as soon as you have to interact with another team, say to get funding, you got to go to the finance people for money. Congratulations, you're no longer whole because you did not have that money resource you desperately needed to fund the team. If you've got to go to some toolsmiths to get access to tools to do your job, congratulations, you're not whole. If you need to go work with the enterprise architects to make sure you're aligned with the rest of the organization, congratulations, you're not whole. And when you ask teams, who else do you need to work with in order to get the job done, as soon as they give you any answer whatsoever, congratulations, they're not whole. That is the norm. 97, 98% of teams, if you look at the industry stats, 98 or 97% of Agile teams have to work with somebody else to get the job done. They are not whole, never have been, never will be. And that's okay, because what we do is we collaborate, we coordinate with other teams, with other groups in the organization to get the job done. And if we're really smart, we work with them effectively and try to offload some of our work onto them. Get them to do the work, not us. Why not? It's going to speed things up, right? So one of the really questionable things that I hear about Scrum Masters is they're there to protect the team from the rest of the organization. No. I want to work effectively with the rest of the organization. Now, maybe somebody should protect the rest of the organization from my team. Okay, I can maybe see that argument. But certainly, I don't want to have a barrier between my team and the rest of the org. I want somebody that can help us figure out how to use the rest of the org effectively. Very different mindset. So anyways, at a very high level, we have to achieve these things. But my team will achieve these basic process goals in a different way than your team, because we're different people in different situations, and that's okay. So the next level down is we need to be able to choose our practices. So how do we do that? So this diagram, excuse me, is working through the notation from some goal diagrams, which we'll see in a minute. And the basic idea, each of those process goals, so there's 21 process goals in the previous slide, each of them have multiple decision points. things that you need to think through. So for example, when we talk about forming the team, basic decisions that we need to make either implicitly or explicitly are things like, how big is the team going to be? Where are these people going to come from? How available are these people going to be to the team? Are they 100% of the time? Are they part-time? How geographically distributed are we? How organizationally distributed are we? And other issues, as you can see there. We need to think all these things through, and we will. We have to. This is the nature of the beast. Our point is, let's do this explicitly. Let's make good decisions because we know we're making these decisions and we know what our options are. So for each of these decision points, we have options. Now, we're not saying we've identified all possible options, but we are saying we've identified a pretty good range, enough to let you know that you got choices. And then in behind all of these choices, we recognize that there's advantages and disadvantages. There is no such thing as a best practice. Never has been, never will be. That is marketing BS. Any given practice works well in some situations and is a mess in others. So you need to choose the right techniques for the situation that you find yourself in. So just because a practice worked well for another team doesn't mean it will work well for you. That's why that experiment step a few slides ago is absolutely critical. Try to identify a likely strategy that will work, that you think is going to work. Try it out to see if it works for you in your situation, and if it does, adopt it. If it doesn't, abandon it. Make intelligent decisions based on trade-offs, not just because some incredibly good-looking speaker told you it was a good idea. Nod your heads now. Okay, there we go. If you learned one thing at this conference, it's that I am an incredibly good-looking speaker. Okay. Ooh, Scott's lying. Okay, so here's what the form initial team goal diagram looks like. Got a bunch of choices. What's interesting as well, the arrows, whenever you see an arrow like that, it's an indication that the strategies towards the top of the list are generally more effective than the strategies towards the bottom of the list. Your mileage may vary a bit, but for the most part, that's the way it's going to play out. So it's sort of a maturity model, but not quite, if you're into the old CMI continuous improvement stuff. And if you're not, fine. Probably good. Anyways, this is the goal for securing funding. There's choices there. It does not have to be fixed price or fixed bid up front. Worst possible way, actually, you can fund a project if you're still doing projects, or fund a team. This is the goal diagram for addressing changing stakeholder needs. A little more to it than having a product backlog. And this, I think, is the difference. So the methods will tell you, do a product backlog because that's the best practice. Park your brain at the door, do what you're told because you learned that in your 2-day certification mastery workshop. Here's the one choice that we'll give you. But you're smart, you can figure it out if it doesn't work for you. Level of advice. Whereas in Discipline Agile, we say, hey, you know what? Here's some choices. Choose what's best. Choose the best thing you can do in the situation that you face. Maybe a product backlog is the best you can do right now. It's not the best way to do things, by the way. The lean folks are very clear about that. And other folks are very clear about that too, but it's a good way. It's okay. So choose the best you can. This is the goal diagram for producing a potentially consumable solution. This is where a lot of our development and just-in-time requirements, just-in-time design type stuff is. Just-in-time documentation, all good stuff. Once again, you got choices. There's different ways we can approach development. This is a goal diagram for continuous improvement, more of an organizational level process blade instead of a goal in this case. So there's different ways you can support continuous improvement in your organization, sharing improvements across teams. People management, so if you're struggling with HR, which is an absolutely critical thing, a lot of organizations struggle with HR. A little bit of advice for that. There's different ways we can reward people and move people between teams and govern them, all good sort of stuff. So it's highly desirable for your people management, resource management, if you want to call people resources, which is sort of insulting. But anyways, whatever you call HR in your organization, it is possible for them to be agile. They have choices too. There's different ways we can go about evolving our WoW, holding retrospectives, all that good sort of stuff. The critical word there is probably experimentation. Identify a likely strategy experiment, see if it works for you in your situation. Without that experimentation, you're going to get into trouble. So you want to be constantly experimenting, constantly learning. So, and this is another interesting observation. Even if I could inflict the same process on every team. So say I'm Harry Potter and I wave my magic wand, say some Latin words, hocus pocus, do a scrummus, and I inflict the same method on everybody. And it's an Agile method, of course. Well, baked right into Agile is continuous improvement. We're constantly talking about doing retrospectives and learning and improving. So even if I inflicted the same process on everybody, a couple months later, if they're actually following the process, they're all doing something different anyways, right? Because they're doing retrospectives, they're learning, they're changing the way that they work. So if you happen to be in a situation where management wants a repeatable process, good luck, has absolutely zero chance of working for you. Unless you happen to be a single team company, and then it'll work. But anyways, other than that, it's not going to work out for you. So get off that path. It can't possibly work. And what's another interesting implication is regardless of what life cycle you start with, if you keep the team together and if you allow them and motivate them to improve, they will work their way away from that life cycle, probably to a better life cycle. So they might start with that Scrum-based Agile life cycle or the Kanban Lean life cycle. Good for them. Those are awesome life cycles. But if they learn, if they're allowed to improve, if they're allowed to learn, they're allowed to experiment, they will work their way towards some sort of continuous delivery thing, which is exactly what you want them to do. Allow them, get out of their way, allow them to get better. Allow them to be like Amazon and Google, doing awesome stuff. Why wouldn't you want that? So, to wrap this up, context counts. Can't say it enough. Every team, every person, every organization is unique. They will work in different ways. They will have unique ways of working. In order to enable this, choice is good. Give them choices. Let them help. So don't just force them to figure it out on their own. This is the challenge with the prescriptive methods. They all wave their hands and they say, yes, you can tailor the process to do whatever you want. And that's absolutely true. I agree with that. It's absolutely true. But they don't give you any help to do so. That's a problem, right? So in Discipline Agile, we give you that help. We give you actual hope to do this continuous improvement stuff, and we help you to make it effective by giving you good guidance. And it's reasonably lightweight. Those diagrams, yeah, there's a little bit of notation there, and it might take a few minutes to figure it out. But those diagrams are as straightforward as it's going to get. So choose, let alone the information behind them. And be pragmatic. It's not about being agile. It's not about being lean. It's about being successful. It's about getting better. It's about learning. It's about experimenting and finding out what works for you and always be getting better. And that is the fundamental message coming out of all these DevOps case studies if you choose to read them. I'd also like to point out, we're giving out a book, The Executive Guide to Discipline Agile. It has several of the diagrams. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is in here. And if you drop by our booth, just ask. They should have stacks out by now. So feel free to go say hello and get a book. And if you don't want a book, well, feel free to say hello anyways. And there's some nice people in the booth, and they're lonely, crying themselves to sleep tonight probably. They're so lonely. Help them. Go see them. Anyway, so we've got a few minutes. I don't know. They're probably not lonely. They're probably having a good time without me. Okay, anyways, I got a few minutes for questions. Any questions or any answers? Answers are good too. Wave your signaling device. I'm half blind here, by the way. Oh, there's a lot of people in the audience. That gentleman there, we assume you're a gentleman. Shout.
Okay, so you make the case that the framework depends on the organization, but having said that, is all right, or let's say if you're a company that's defining itself from scratch.
Yeah, so company is, the question is there one framework better than others, particularly if you're designing a company from scratch? If you're designing a company from scratch, I would certainly start with DA? Like why? Like maybe start with something, I'll go back a billion slides. Apologize for that. Say starting with something like Scrum or Kanban might be the way to go, and get yourself on the red curve, right? Because they have solved some problems for you. Now, I would argue that I would rather start with DA, and so if Scrum makes sense to you, then start with the Agile lifecycle. If Kanban makes sense with you, start with the Lean lifecycle, because we figured out how to do it from beginning to end. So we figured out, hey, these are the things you need to think about, because regardless of life cycle, you're going to have to think about these sorts of things when you're putting your team together. When you're doing development, you're going to have to work through these sort of things, and there's things behind that. So we've already done the heavy lifting for you, whereas Scrum is great. Like it deals with management stuff and requirements management stuff and a lot of roles and responsibilities. They solve a few problems, but they purposely don't do anything around technology or architecture or testing or programming or all these other things that you're going to have to figure out for yourself. And yes, you're smart and you can figure it out for yourself, or you could actually spend time making money at your startup. I would suggest making money is probably more important to you. So yeah, I would start with something like that. But if you start with a canned method, then basically what you're doing is you're starting on the red line, and that'll get you going. But eventually, you really do want to get into continuous improvement mode, become more of a learning organization. So that's the idea there. But drop by the booth, get a free book. Ask him for the intro book as well. Tell him I said, give me the intro book or else, because that'll solve that problem. That gentleman there with the hand up. Yeah. So the question is, if the team doesn't really have the skills or the background, what framework would be often? So don't choose a framework. Chances are they're going to choose wrong, right? It'd be like asking me, so Scott, which ballet should we dance tonight? I'm a big fat old guy. I don't know. Why are you asking me? I'm not qualified to make that decision. Same thing with this, right? So this is the challenge with the red line. How the heck do you figure out the right framework to begin with? I don't know. You don't know what you're talking. You don't know. You don't have the background to make that important decision, so don't. What I would rather, now I don't have the slide, but what I'd rather do is take more of a lean approach and get on this continuous improvement path, because that's a lot easier to understand. So, because you're going to war with the army that you got, right? So choosing the wrong framework, which is what happens a lot, is probably not going to help. And don't trust me. Talk to the other people here. There's a lot of organizations. There's organizations with booths that can tell you this story where they're on their 6th or 7th round of trying to do an Agile transformation. And they choose wrong, and they've got a lot of severe cultural problems. But they choose improperly, or they choose poorly, and they try it out. It blows up in their face. So what do? You blame Agile, right? You always blame that. You never blame yourself for making a bad decision. You blame the framework. So no, I don't think the framework is at fault there. So I would start with one of the green lines and work from there. Next. Actually, I guess I did have that slide. Yeah. Start with that. Don't start with a framework is my advice. That gentleman there.
So, Scott, are you suggesting that you have figured out all the answers in the discipline?
No, I am very clear that we have not figured out all the answers, but I'm also very clear we've figured out way more than you have. And we're years ahead of you on that. So, so I think I was pretty clear that we give you a lot of, I'll find the diagram eventually. So there's a lot of choices. I think I was very clear that we have not identified all possible choices, but we have identified a very good range, enough to make you think, enough to let you know you got choice, and which is way better than any other methods. Like most of the other methods, I have done this. I've gone through and said, hey, Scrum is this choice, this choice, this choice, this choice, and this choice, done. And they've done that too, right? They're clear about that. Yeah. Yeah. So we've got it. I unfortunately don't have the book. The book's coming out later at the end of November, called Choose Your WoW, which actually walks through. So right now, has all these diagrams, but in behind the diagrams are tables of here's the technique, here's a description of it, here's a good reference if you want to go. So here's TDD in one paragraph. Here's a good reference if you need more detail than one paragraph, and here are the trade-offs of TDD. So now you can choose intelligently, and because there's hundreds of practices, it's still going to be a 400-page book, and with hundreds of practices with one paragraph descriptions, and here, go look here for the details if one paragraph didn't get the job done for you. So yeah, you're going to need coaching because software development is complex. Yeah, so the questions around have you segmented based on maturity of the organization. We can help you. Come talk to us. We can help you with this. We can do an assessment to get you going and improve that. And there's other companies that do this too, right? There's a lot of consulting companies here that will do assessments and training, coaching, and stuff like that. We have, I think, the advantage that because we're taking a discipline agile approach, we're looking at the bigger picture. So we're not just teaching you one method or one technique. We truly are agnostic, and because I can very easily show how SAFe is an instance of this, LESS is an instance of this, Scrum is an instance of this, Kanban is an instance of this, and that's okay, right? So we've done the heavy process lifting for you, because I'm sure you'll have some teams that where some sort of Scrumish thing makes sense, some sort of Kanbanish thing makes sense, and you might have a real large program where some sort of LESS or SAFe-ish thing makes sense. So why not do that, but still have the consistent governance and the flexibility to do some sort of SAFe-ish thing that makes sense for you, as opposed to this is the only way you can do it because that's what we gave you in your 4-day training course. So that's a big difference. Okay, anyways, thank you very much for coming out. Like I said, please drop by the Discipline Agile booth right over there. Free book. It's an awesome book. Don't force me to go home with books because they're heavy. Do it for my back. Okay, thank you.